All right. Welcome, Traffic Think Tank members, to another exclusive webinar. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to our presenter, Dmitry Dragilev from JustReachOut.io. He is at the forefront, in my opinion, of actually using press effectively, not just to get links, but to get mentions, grow your brand. This is a guy that I learned something from every single time I talk to him. So I'm really, really excited that he had the time to be able to do this for us today. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Good to be here. Excited. Great community, just phenomenal community. Really happy to be talking about this stuff. I think it's important stuff that a lot of people just kind of sort of do and not really have that strategy around. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to make sure that you guys can see the screen. Before I had some issues, so do let me know if you can see, the slides moving. But we'll jump right into it. I'm not going to talk about myself, what I do, or any of that stuff. I kind of want to give you the meat and potatoes here. I'd say this, that like from 2008 to 2015, I've been doing traditional SEO, just acquiring links and doing my own thing, right? And many of you can relate. Many of you are SEO. You do this a lot. You get those links. I built this company. There's a few of us in the company. I was the only marketer. We built it from 0 to 40 million page views. It was acquired by Google, primarily through this SEO kind of outreach. A little married together with some PR, which I'll talk about later on. And in 2016, I realized something odd was happening in the SEO space in general. Like this whole notion of acquiring links and authority domains and linking, less and less, basically, less and less clicks were actually going to the pages, right? That I was trying to get traffic to. And I was like, what's going on? Like, why are these, I'm trending, I'm higher, higher, and higher. And it's funny enough, Rand recently wrote an article about this no click-throughs, right? What's happening is Google is, of course, indexing most of the stuff that we have in our content and fronting it up so people don't actually click over to the pages themselves. And Rand Fishkin's post very recently just kind of hit the nail on the head, and this is an excerpt from it that I really love to reference all the time. Plateauing growth of total searches, decreasing click-throughs, cannibalization of many popular queries. More results are answered entirely in the SERP itself, right? Greater competition, so all this stuff. So I started realizing, these relationships that I build with publications, with press, with journalists, with influencers are starting to be more important than me trying to accumulate a bunch of links and rank higher. And I started working on this a bit more. This is a quote from Rand, SEO in the future will be harder to invest in, harder to win at, with decreasing ROI. So it's like, all right, not just me, people are talking about this, right? And so since 2015, I've used an approach which combines PR and SEO together to acquire close to 5,000 customers, over 5,000 customers for my current project, my startup, Just Reach Out, which is about 3 to 4 years old. I'd say it was live and actually functioning for about 2 years now, but it's been quite a journey. And so this is the reason I want to present this stuff to you. It's not just, this is what I live and breathe, and I want to show you how to use PR in an unconventional way, not just like Nick said, to get a bunch of backlinks, but to actually get relationship built, right? And when I talk about PR, I always think about how is it going to drive revenue and get more customers for me as a business, or me as a startup, or whatever it is that you're working on. And I always go back to, again, credit to Rand for this image. to this audience piece, right? But I go back and I say, all right, here's the audience that I want to go after, right? And I need to figure out what they're doing. Like, where are they hanging out? Are they reading some kind of blog that I need to get to? Or are they listening to a podcast or watching some kind of YouTube channel? So for me, PR starts from this, right? So I try and make a list of where my customers are hanging out, what type of influencers I need to build a relationship with. And an influencer, in my mind, we'll go over that a little bit. It could be anybody. It could be an investor who has a very popular blog, or it could be a YouTube celebrity, or it could be a meetup that happens here locally in New York. So it's very different when I think of PR. I think of, where do my customers congregate, and how can I build a relationship with somebody who holds all of those folks in their hands. And this is what I specifically was just talking about. You building relationships with those outlets, right? And for me, I've never done this before. I'm a coder by trade. I've been developing software for a long time. And in 2012, when I started doing this for the first time, I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was just kind of starting conversations with people. And building relationships is different for me, right? But at the end, getting your brand in these publications, or getting an interview in these publications, or having your stuff shared by somebody who has a lot of followers, this is all PR in my sense, like for me, right? So I don't care if it's like a guy tweeting about something that has my audience, or it could be some blog that picking the right audience, right? The person that holds your audience, the right influencer, picking the right publication, podcast, conference, blog, all this stuff, it's 50% of the battle. Maybe it's even more. For me, like, figuring out, I don't want to go after Forbes. I don't want to go after those huge publications, because even though you saw I was in Forbes, but the audience segmentation there is just so vague. Like, you get a link from there, sure, but like, if I want to go after my audience, I want to zero in on like a very specific niche of people who are experiencing this pain point, and I want to convert them the best I can, versus going very broad but getting a lot of traffic. And so, examples of this stuff is very different, like in terms of PR. So like Brad, right? He and I worked, he's founder, head of content at PipeDrive. He's ranking #1 for the term sales management. Now, this was a combined effort of doing SEO and PR. This effort, and he pulls in very specific customers from this PR/SEO effort. His article ranks high, but it's ranking high because he did a lot of PR outreach to other blogs to promote, give him an opportunity to guest write, right? Very different approach from, say, Martin, who answered a Quora question and got 1 million views of his answer, got 600 customers from it, and decided this is what he's going to keep doing. From Germany, doesn't speak English very well, didn't even have a product at the time, just went out, did that, and thought, I should probably build a product around keeping focus, and created an app, and now has a business out of it. Completely different from somebody who's never written an article ever in his life, writes an article just as President Trump gets elected that he's bad for business, and it gets featured on homepage of Fast Company for 18 hours, the first time he ever pitches it. I mean, like, very different approaches to starting a conversation with an influencer, but all of this is PR in my sense. And so a lot of times people say, should I pay someone to do it? And I say, you can do this. Like, don't pay any other consultant, PR agency, anybody else who's charging you money to do this, because I did it by myself. I built relationships with all these publications, with all of these bloggers and influencers, and now, you know, I see how this is done, and anybody can do this. And in fact, if you own these relationships, you'll own that future traffic. As I mentioned, SEO is starting to plateau. In my opinion, at least, I think. So like those relationships, I think are going to be pivotal for your success going forward. And so in this presentation, I kind of wanted to show you guys how to build these relationships, right? But before we get into that, I just want to go back to that goal, right? So we want to remember your targets and your goals, right? So like a sample goal could be, I want to get 1,000 more installs for my productivity app, right? And that could be your goal for your building those relationships and doing any kind of PR. It's very specific, right? And you know, you will then from your goal can stem back to your target, right? So your target would be influencers in productivity space. So it's very specific, right? So going back to that slide which had the audience, we kind of looked at different types of audiences there, and now we know, you know, influencers in productivity space, this is what you'll be going after. Remember this picture here. So it's very specific. And then you can start creating that personalized conversation starter, which we're getting to, you know, soon here. So it, you know, for me, it could be a founder, it could be a journalist, it could be a blogger, it could be an investor, or it could be a celebrity. It could be any one of those, and they're all different, right? So in my case, you know, founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, I built a relationship with him because he has connections to a lot of companies who might purchase my software and my outreach service, right? Or my course or something like that. So he introduced me to a lot of people. Very different from, say, Tim Ferriss, who, again, would have potential connections, but he would actually introduce me maybe to 2 or 3 other people who have other connections who would introduce me to. He directly probably wouldn't have introduced me to the right people at that time when I met him. Gary Vaynerchuk, very different. He was actually became a customer of Just Reach Out. Completely different, right? From Christina, who's an actual journalist. So you'd never think like hanging out with Gary would be a PR, but they ended up for me being a much bigger, you know, source of customers than, say, Christina, who covered us on Mashable a couple times and gotten some press and customers for me. But remember, I'm thinking back to my 1,000 installs. I want my 1,000 installs, and I want to make sure I connect with the right people. Andrea Husbetti, you're looking at her like who, like special projects director and entrepreneur, who cares? Well, she actually used to control the guest publishing for Entrepreneur. And so when I built a relationship with her back in 2016, I, you know, started that conversation. Very powerful person to have a connection to, but by the looks of it here, it's nobody that you ever want to start a conversation with. In fact, I built relationships with these people. You might kind of like, you know, Neil, you've probably seen Paul Graham, but you're like, Ashton Kutcher, you meet, you're like, really? Like, what in the world? Well, Ashton is actually connected to a lot of the startup community. And in my thinking, he could introduce me to a lot of startups that he's invested in. And he was the type of character that would do that if he kind of saw the value in it, right? He won't be like those VCs that kind of drag he will be the one that would do it. And I'll show you the email that I sent him, by the way, and what it took me to start the conversation with him. But so long story short, an influencer is anybody who has an audience who might become your customer, anybody. And you guys seen plenty of examples that I've shown you here of the different types of influencers, whether it's a journalist or an Ashton Kutcher or Paul Graham, the investor, and the fact that all of them, Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, somehow has a path for me to 1,000 installs, because I remember that I need 1,000 installs. That's my goal, and you know, I have a focus of my target. My target is people that need PR and SEO and content stuff. Each influencer, of course, needs that personalized conversation starter. And this is where it gets really interesting. This is kind of like we're starting to get into the meat and potatoes here. of how to start a conversation with somebody you never knew about. You don't know about them at all. So here's a great example. This is from 2013. Like I said, I started doing this stuff fresh off the boat around 2012, 2011, 2013. I was still rough around the edges, I gotta say, on this stuff, but I'm already kind of, doing okay. Like I start getting responses from people. So here's a good example. Daryl writes for TechCrunch, and at the time, I wanted to build relationships with Daryl. Now, I didn't know about anything he was writing about. He wrote about Hue API, and you guys probably know those Hue light bulbs that were kind of flickering back and forth, like different colors, and you could control them from your iPhone. You could change colors and do all sorts of funky things with them. And he wrote a lot about it. And I wanted to start a conversation with him, but I pictured what would I say to him if I was in the room or in a conference, just walk up to him. Like, what would I say? I was lost. Like, I didn't know what to tell him. I wanted him to cover my, my consultancy, like trying to, do PR for people and do SEO for people. But that wasn't going to happen. He writes for TechCrunch. Like, who am I? I'm a nobody, right? So I look up tutorials of people that are doing hacks with these API, with the Hue light bulb API, right? And I find some design firm doing this, right? And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm gonna send it to him. So I send it to him, and he says, "Thank you very much." He publishes it, and I'm like, oh, cool. That's actually cool. Like the guy really thought it was neat. And this was a cool little tutorial where you could text blue to like an API, and the light bulb would turn blue, right? And I was like, oh, cool. Like test red, and it changes red. And it was kind of a big deal back then. This was 2013. And he says, thank you, and we start a conversation with him. To this day, I'm still on email with him, right? So that's called a personalized conversation starter. Here's the email that I sent to Ashton Kutcher that took me about a year to put together and get a response from him. Now, 2011, you can see that I'm already doing this stuff. My first job in the space was 2008, actually. Actually, 2007. So from 2007 to 2012, I had jobs, like real jobs. From 2012, I was doing things on my own. And so this is a job. I was still I was at Zerb, and this was a design firm. And I really, really wanted Ashton Kutcher because I was starting to build my own consultancy up for marketing and PR and SEO. And I wanted him to connect me to these folks, to potential clients. And I really thought he was investing in a lot of startups. He was going to be the best guy to do this. And so here's what I did. I started a speaker series, and I followed him, and I tried to figure out what are all the different people he's mentioned that he admires. And I got all of them to speak in my speaker series. And when I did all that, I wrote this email. And so I mentioned that was the case, and I wanted him to be the next one on my soapbox. And he wrote, thanks for reaching out. Big fan of those guys. Kenny Donnelly in my office. He handles my calendar and all my speaking engagements. So I ended up talking to Kelly, and we connected. And it certainly, I'm just showing you examples of a personalized conversation starter of how to start that conversation, right? And my only test with all of stuff, like when you're trying to start a conversation with, say, the editor of Entrepreneur Magazine or New York Times or Financial Times, or maybe it's some blogger that you really admire, would you say this out loud to them if you saw them at a conference? And if the answer is yes, great, send it over. But read it out loud, be 100% honest, okay? So with that, I want to go into 4 strategies to build relationships with influencers. And these might be something that you're already familiar with, maybe not, but they're very actionable. You can implement them almost right away. And keeping in the back of your mind everything we talked about, right? We remember the goal, right? We remember the target, and we remember that these influencers can be anybody. They can be a journalist or anybody else, a blogger, a YouTube celeb, whatever it may be. I'm just gonna check to see if there's anything crazy going on in the chat? Nope, slides are moving, things are good. So here we go. Become a source for an article. And this is probably the lowest hanging fruit. You guys have probably heard of HERO, helpreporter.net or .com. You guys, if you haven't, check it out. It's a great tool which shows you opportunities from every single day of journalists, bloggers, writers that are submitting these. They need a source to quote. Now, besides Help a Reporter, there are thousands of these out there, right? There is ProfNet, which is a very, 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 very cool, I'd say way better quality newsletter that comes out every single day where the same thing happens. Journalists from New York Times, Wall Street Journal, any beat. This could be mommy blogger. This could be, you know, retail space, anything out there. They're submitting hundreds of these a day saying, hey, we need an expert to talk about this, right? And all you got to do is just answer them, right? Our software indexes all of them, and we have them under the Press Opportunities tab. We even have podcast opportunities, and we have ones over Twitter called Journal Requests. But you can check it out. You know, you can try it out or see some of these right now if you want for free. You don't have to put in your email, anything like that. If you go to this link, it should pull some of them up for you, just so you can see the real live ones, what they look like and everything. Lowest hanging fruit for you. You basically don't have to do anything. You can hire an intern to do this, or just yourself, you know, like just one search a day. Spend maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes answering some of these. There's an email address for every one of them, and you can type in very basic things like business or something like that. The trouble with the actual newsletters just takes a while for you to search through all of them. That's why I built the tool that just indexes all of them. But these are some decent ones like bookmark.com here, and I don't know, there's really good ones on there. So you can check it out live now if you want, or you can just take a note down. Help a Reporter, ProfNet, Journal Request, Source Bottle is another one. There's just so many of them. So become a source for an article. That's number one, right? Number two, Quora or Reddit. And this is a pretty big one. So just pay attention to this one because this works really well. I do this all the time. It's a little bit more involved, so they'll get a bit more involved with the four that I give you here. So take it, you know, like I would, you know, do all of them, but of course this might take a bit more time than say answering a journalist request, right? A press opportunity. So here we go, Quora. Rebecca Grant writes from VentureBeat. I want to build a relationship with Rebecca. I go back to what would I say to Rebecca if I met her at a conference? Well, I do research about her. Now, why do I want a relationship with her? Because I see that she's covering the types of startups that she covers my beat. She has my readership, and those people will convert to become my customers of my software. And again, it's fulfilling that goal of downloads or revenue, whatever it is. So I do research and I see something that clicks with me. She wrote an article about confessions of an ex-journalist, 1,740 plus articles and countless pitches later, I've got some truths to tell. And this is an honest account of a journalist getting a lot of pitches, right? And this is my space, my wheelhouse, right? Since 2007 or 8, I've been in PR, SEO space, kind of hacking my way through it. Never had a formal kind of, you know, I never went to school for PR or business or anything like that. I was just a coder before. I just moved to Silicon Valley, decided to just kind of do this for fun, and then just kind of stuck with me. So anyway, I liked the article. It clicks with me. I go back to my blog post. And you can see I'm still editing stuff here. There's like some spelling mistakes, right? But I'm essentially editing my blog post to stick her quote into it, right? And I'm messing around with the formatting here because I want to reply back from her too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take her quote, quoted article, a quote from her article, stick it in my blog post. I'm going to be emailing her and say, hey, I'm promoting you, right? But I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to go into Quora, and I'm going to find the most popular question on pitching journalists. And then in that question, I'm going to reference my blog post, which referenced her blog post. But I'm going to quote her in here so that when I email her, not only will she see herself quoted in her own, like basically in my own blog post, but also quoted in the Quora thread. I mean, ask some questions if this is somewhat unclear, but I'm promoting her on my own blog. I'm also promoting her in the Quora answer. That's pretty popular on Quora right now. I do all that, and remember, I left some spelling mistakes here, or some weird formatting issues, because maybe she'll come back and see that and correct that, like basically say, hey, this needs to be corrected. This will be a reason for her to come back, right? And I write her this little email. I was working at this company, Polar, at the time, which ended up, which was bought by Google in 2014. And I sent this note, and so I ended up just sending this thing to her, right? And she ends up saying, well, thank you so much, starts conversation with me, right? And this actually ends up becoming a thing that I do to many different people, right? To start a conversation. I take their content, reference it in my blog. If I don't want to reference it in my blog, that's fine as well. I just put it in my answer on Quora. Not only do I do this, a lot of my customers and clients end up doing this. So in this case, somebody who is working in HR analytics, this guy, Jason McPherson, goes on Quora, types in employee retention, and finds that there's this really hot thread that's happening. He answers that question. He's at the top of it. He references his own content in it, but also references somebody else's who he wants the conversation with. Now he's pulling traffic to his own blog. He's starting a conversation with somebody else. That somebody else is thankful, just like, in this case, Rebecca, for promoting them, and starts that conversation. Now, a bonus to all of this is that you can get your Quora answers republished as real articles, which most people don't know about. But essentially, let's look at Eric Duffy's answer here, who I know pretty well. His answer gets republished on Inc. Not only Inc., but it's got Newsweek, Huffington Post, Forbes as well. And this is a full-on article. Like these links they're legit. They're not a no-follow link. It's a regular link. And this is an actual article. So a lot of these publications will, the right person has to arrange all that to happen. But, it's a pretty cool little added bonus. So you start a conversation with an influencer, you promote your own content, you get republished, and you pull in some SEO traffic through this number two, tactic number two, which is pretty neat, all right? The third and fourth are going to be pretty simple, but they'll be probably the most involved ones. I had some questions on the best ways to pitch infographics and stuff before, so maybe we can jump into that a bit. This is the pitch that I built Polar on. Polar was the company that I worked on for 2 years, went from 0 to 40 million page views, and eventually was acquired by Google. And I mentioned at the beginning, the second or third slide, that this was the quintessential kind of like SEO meets PR. In my space, this was way less SEO driven, but it just so happened because we held all the data on our side. So number 3 is provide data or insights, right? And so in this case, this is the pitch that I would peruse Tech Meme every single day, and I would look at what is hot and trending right now. and I would create a poll, and I'd get a bunch of people answer it, and I essentially pitch that poll data to a journalist or a blogger, and I would just revolve that over and over and over and over and over again, like rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And this was by far the best way to keep growing, because data was like crack for most bloggers and journalists, and they all love to get more and more of it. And so we ended up growing really steadily, really fast, and ended up really closing in a lot of those relationships. We were on, NPR and TechCrunch and Fast Company Inc. and just the list goes on. I have a complete 1,400 articles or so on my Digo account on my site for everything which we published in that 2-year span before we got acquired by Google. But this was essentially the tactic. You create polls, and I see this used over and over and over again these days. There's a detailed case study that I wrote about it, which I shared in the beginning, but you can kind of Google this and see basically how this happened, and the actual tactics of creating that piece of like basically in my case, it wasn't even a piece of content, it was just data, and it was quick data, like quick poll data about Apple or something like that, or data insights. Probably one of the best ways to start conversations with influencers, bloggers, journalists, and so forth, reporters, because they love the data, right? If it's on beat and on topic with what they're reporting. So pitches like this would end up articles like this, right? So that's that. That's providing data and insights. It's not a revolutionary concept, but this gives you some ideas as to how to do this and how you can keep doing this, right? The process, rather simple, but it takes a bit of time, right, to do this stuff. And then the last but not least, we're wrapping up here, is interviewing somebody. Many of you have done this. I know that, most marketers out there have gone out and just, done I was chatting with Adam Steele actually today about this stuff. They have a lot of these roundup posts out there. There's a lot of different kinds of interviews people do. It's probably one of the most overlooked methods of trying to get exposure for yourself. So I knew that, Dan Martell or Tim Ferriss or even the Winklevoss twins, or the founders of Dribble or Neil Patel, they all have my audience. So if I interview them and I promote the interview, chances are they might promote the interview. And all I wanted is just a tweet from them, maybe a share on LinkedIn and Facebook, whatever works, right? I didn't want like a full-on article from them, but it works really great. And it works better if it's a very topical question at the time, right? So like this is me trying to do this in 2011. I started 2007, so in this space, 2011, this is Facebook stock. This is before Facebook was public, right? And I am starting a conversation with, I think this was Rand at the time. Yeah, this definitely was Rand. This is Rand Fishkin's early picture. Hey, they got to start somewhere. This was one of the first conversations I had with him. Now we correspond all the time. He made out his book to me, or I pointed out a few spelling mistakes in his book, his latest book, Lost and Found. Reread it a couple times. Love the book, by the way. And but this was how I started the conversation. I asked him a question for a roundup post that was very thematic, very topical at the time, 2011. And here's some other ones, Paul Buchheit, the guy who coded up the initial Gmail, founder of FriendFeed. Back then, the guy ended up introducing me to a lot of customers for Zurb. Zurb was a design firm at the time, and that's what I was trying to, get customers for. And so it naturally, with Moses too, an intro with Rand, we eventually had Rand speak at Zurb Soapbox, the speaker series that I organized. He introduced us to a number of his clients who ended up becoming our clients. So it's all about that goal that you drive back to. So that's pretty much it, guys. You know, I want to just I've talked a lot about different things. I want to make sure this is very clear in your minds. Make sure you kind of jotted down some of these. Hopefully, I hope that you'll implement some of these in the weeks to come, and give me a shout on Slack. Let me know kind of like what's happening. Show me your pitches. I want you to remember that you got to say it out loud, whatever you're sending. So make sure you do that. And then the 4 tactics, right? We got source for an article. We remember what that was all about, right? This is those different types of queries that come in. We have the Quora one, which was very fancy, but ended up becoming really great way to strike those conversations and promote your own content, and of course get some SEO from potential republishing on Inc. and other publications. The third one was provide data or insights. This is how Polar became Polar, and we sold to Google through these polls that I created. Which one would you like? iOS 6, iOS 7, based on what's trending right now in the news. And of course, the final one we just talked about, interviewing someone. So that's all. You know, I'll fast forward to this part, and I'd love questions. I'm happy to hear any questions you guys have on this. If you have any kind of comments, anything else around this, yeah.
And dude, that was awesome. The approach for Quora in particular, I really like. We do a few things that are becoming more publicized now on Quora, like obviously like doing topical searches for more top of the funnel type keywords and making sure that like our customers are writing on those threads and they have links back to their stuff on threads. And something that we've been doing for a little while that other people are now starting to write about and publicize is, you know, aligning your editorial calendar with Quora questions. So it's like, hey, here's Quora questions that have decent traffic where you can drop a link to content that you don't have now, but when you do have it, go back to that Quoracast question to drop that link for the referral traffic. But the approach of sort of like, it's like ego baiting on steroids, I feel like. I quoted you in my blog post, but I also quoted you in this Quora thread that's very popular. I also really like the sort of the psychological exercise of intentionally having like some misspellings and some sort of messed up formatting to like have like, because I always do that. Like if people ever pitch me stuff and they like, if I'm ever included in a roundup or something or any of that stuff where like I didn't respond and like they have the link going to the wrong place or they misspelled my name, I always get back to them and I'm like, hey, I'm a whore for links. So like I always have them fix it. I'm always like, oh, like that, you know, could you change the anchor text on that? So that's really cool. I really like that.
Yeah, people respond to that all the time when they like something is messed up a little bit on it. Or no, sometimes I end up going to other pages and be like, I want to start a conversation with them, and I'll find a little mistake on there, and that's a great way to start a conversation. Sometimes I'll pretend I found a mistake while there is no mistake, send a note, and they're like, no, there's actually no issue. I'm like, oh, it must have been like a caching thing. But anyways, like, what do you do?
I like that a lot. Little psychological triggers like that. It's awesome. I think everybody may just be sitting with their mouths open on the other end here because I'm not seeing any questions coming. Usually we've got a decent run of questions coming. I think everybody's just sort of impressed and scratching their heads potentially.
Somebody asked before, there was in the Slack channel, somebody was before the webinar, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about like pitching infographics and the best pitches to use for that. I believe that was the question.
So here, I'm gonna close this out and stay on though. Just stay on. Just give me 1 second.
Looks like there's a question.
Thank you again so much.